20 experts worked for 3 days, with millions of dollars at risk, and just as Phoenix Technologies was about to give up, a janitor with a mop entered the room. With his daughter waiting at home, he glanced at the whiteboard and changed the future of artificial intelligence with a single idea. He thought no one was watching, but Phoenix's coldest CEO, Victoria Sterling, was watching, and what she did next changed their story forever. 3 days, 17 people, 6 emergency meetings, $500,000 in consulting fees, and what do we have? Chaos on the screen. Victoria Sterling's voice cut through the room like ice shattering against glass. No one responded. Silence reigned among the engineers, beads of sweat forming on their collars. The massive LED screen at the center of the meeting room flickered feebly, graphics flowing in red lines, lines of code streaming like a digital disaster. "You have 5 minutes. I want a solution, not another apology." She tapped her heel once on the floor, then turned and left. The door closed silently behind her, leaving behind the stale smell of burnt coffee and stress. Outside the glass wall, a janitor bent down to pick up a spilled soda can. He wore a faded gray uniform and cheap headphones, one hanging loosely, the other tucked into his ear, but his eyes weren't on the trash. They were fixed on the formula on the whiteboard, staring back like a riddle. Marcus Thompson, 36 years old, single father, night shift janitor at Phoenix Technologies. What no one knew was that he had once worked on advanced artificial intelligence at MIT, the best in his class, until life handed him something harder than any exam, a daughter and the funeral of the woman he loved. The lights were still on in the meeting room. The last team had left in defeat. Marcus walked in, set his mop aside. The whiteboard stretched along the wall like a battlefield. Equations worn away, logic loops twisted. He took a dry cloth to clean it and paused. 1 second, he muttered, squinting. He bowed his head. Something's wrong with the math. Not academically, but intuitively. They were using a linear model for nonlinear behavior. Rookie mistake. Dangerous in the wrong hands. He picked up a red pen. Carefully, he erased a section, drew a sigmoid curve, swapped the positions of 2 variables, and underlined a misweighted node. Then he stepped back, folded his arms, and shook his head. They were looking backward. "And you think you're on the right track?" The voice behind him was calm but steely. Marcus turned. Standing in the doorway was Victoria Sterling, CEO of Phoenix Technologies. Dark suit, hair in a tight bun, eyes that measured everything and everyone. I wasn't trying to mess things up," Marcus said quickly. "I just noticed something was wrong." "So you're sweeping the floor and fixing a $100 million algorithm?" "I'm not fixing it. I'm just reframing it. It's like switching from a dull knife to a sharp one. Same job, less pain." Victoria stepped forward, silently scanning the board. She pulled a tablet from her jacket and ran a quick simulation using the changes Marcus had drawn. 8 seconds passed. 18.4% increase in accuracy, she said flatly. Over 60% decrease in errors. She turned to him, looking at him for the first time. Name: Marcus Thompson. Position: night doorman, 3 shifts a week. Last formal education: MIT, dropped out in his sophomore year. My wife passed away, and I had to raise my daughter. A long pause. "Do you understand what you're doing?" "I wasn't trying to trip anyone up," Marcus replied. "I just saw something everyone else was missing." "Sounds like a lucky break. Or like this. If the bathtub is clogged, stop pouring hot water and try to unclog it." Victoria caught a half smile, not quite warm, but human. "You'll be in conference room C tomorrow at 8 a.m. You're on the observer list." "I don't have to be at a meeting. I'm just—" "That wasn't a suggestion, Mr. Thompson. It was an order." "What about my daughter?" "Snacks and zoo tickets, if necessary. She doesn't need much, just a reason to believe her father is worthy of pride." Victoria stood in the doorway, looking over his shoulder. For the first time, her gaze softened, not much, but enough to notice. Maybe after tonight, she will. And with that, she disappeared down the hallway. Marcus stood there for a moment, stunned. He looked at the red drawings on the whiteboard, then turned to the rug in the corner. "I think I owe you a raise, old friend." Marcus didn't sleep much that night. Not from nerves or excitement, but because Emily refused to go to bed until she had told him every detail, the whole story. So he just walked in, and you weren't afraid. "Honey," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "when you held your wife's hand in the hospital and told her daughter she would never see her mother again, CEOs didn't scare you." Emily blinked and then smiled. Not a childish smile, but the kind that said, "I see you, Dad." Then she leaned in and whispered, "I think she likes you." Marcus laughed, tucked her into bed, and stared at the ceiling for a long, long time. At 7:50 a.m., he was standing outside the C conference room at Phoenix Technologies. He was wearing his cleanest button-down shirt, which still had a faint coffee stain near the hem. His old briefcase was slung over his shoulder, containing a notebook, a mechanical pencil, and Emily's folded drawing, a figure holding a broom in one hand and a lightning bolt in the other. Inside the room, suits were swarming around the central screen like fireflies. Diagrams illuminated the walls, graphs, data points, projected timelines. The air smelled of stress and mint candy breath. Then she walked in, Victoria Sterling. This time, Marcus saw her before she spoke. The room changed instantly. People stood straighter, voices lowered, the temperature dropped 2 degrees. He glanced at her once, a short, deliberate look, then pointed to an empty chair near the edge of the table. "This is your place." She didn't ask permission, just sat down. "Let's begin," she said, pushing the room into focus. "Yesterday, during our prediction cycle, we nearly made a miscalculation that would have cost us a multi-stage contract and exposed fundamental weaknesses. But last night," she tapped her tablet, "Marcus's draft, with rough red pencil corrections appearing on the main screen. Someone gave us a gift." The room murmured, eyes shifting to Marcus, then quickly away. "This adjustment reduced our training error by 60%, cut latency by 22 milliseconds, and painfully exposed that." He paused. "It looks very different from what we expected." Silence. Then a hand went up. Jason Harper, senior systems engineer, MBA from Stanford, eyes that said, "I'm trying to be polite, but I'd love to crush you." "With all due respect," he began, "the thing people say right before they're about to be disrespectful. How can we verify that this isn't just luck?" "Run the model," Victoria replied. Jason hesitated, then entered the new parameters. The simulation ran smoothly. No overfitting, predictive behavior aligned across multiple datasets. The green bar was glowing. "It could still be luck," Jason muttered. "Maybe." Marcus spoke for the first time, calm and resolute. "But if it is, I hope we're smart enough to learn from it when luck slips in with a doormat." A few quiet chuckles. Victoria didn't smile, but she nodded very slightly, like a judge accepting an unexpected but valid argument. He caught her by the elevators after the meeting. "You held it together," he said. "I wasn't trying. That's why it worked." They rode down together, at first in silence. Then he asked, "Do you always think like that?" "In analogies, I fix things," Marcus replied. "I have to. And I talk to my daughter as if she were 6, not 60, so I explain technology as plumbing, cooking, car repair. It sticks better that way." "Interesting, useful, you may be right." He hesitated, then looked sideways. "Do you always talk like that?" "How?" "Instead of having a conversation, you run a court case." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "I control the things I can control, even conversations, especially conversations." They entered the lobby. "I don't do daily, Mr. Thompson," he said in a flat voice. Then I'm probably your worst nightmare, he said, offering the faintest of smiles. Maybe, he muttered, but you solved a nightmare last night. That afternoon, Marcus returned to his regular shift, back in uniform, back with his mop and cart, but something had changed. People nodded as they passed him in the hallways, not just the interns, but even the engineers. One even said, "Nice work," in a non-mocking tone. And Emily had drawn a new picture. This time, she had drawn him standing next to a tall woman in a black suit. The caption read, "Dad plus Mrs. Lightning, the best team." Meanwhile, Victoria stood alone in her office, looking out the huge window at the city. A storm was approaching. She didn't care. She tapped her tablet, reopened Marcus's simulation, and watched the line straighten out again and again. No degree, no position, no permission, and yet she whispered to herself. There was a knock on the door. It was Arthur, his longtime CTO, in his early 50s, loyal, outspoken, and the only person in the company who dared to speak his mind to him. That janitor is talking to people. Let them talk. Do you think there's more to him? Hey, I know there is. Arthur folded his arms. You're thinking of giving him access. I'm thinking of listening more carefully to voices that don't come from the board. Arthur raised an eyebrow. You've changed. He made the system better, Victoria said simply. No, Arthur replied. He made you better. She didn't respond, but watched the rain begin to draw soft lines on the window and felt, for the first time in a long time, that she didn't have to solve anything, not right now anyway. The invitation came via email, but not to Marcus's inbox. It went to HR, who printed it out, crossed the building, and handed it to him while he was cleaning a coffee stain on the 3rd floor. You're requested, said the woman in HR, blinking as if she couldn't believe the words herself. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for the executive strategy meeting. Marcus looked up from his bucket. Are you sure this isn't for someone else? It says Marcus Thompson, title says janitor, sounds about right. Guest contributor, technical observer role. Whatever that means. This means they've run out of ideas and are desperate, he said, standing up and wiping his hands on a rag. He smiled, but there was something else in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe even hope. He didn't go home that night. Instead, he went to the 24-hour laundromat, 2 blocks away from Phoenix Technologies. He washed the 2 shirts he owned. He didn't sit down. He just leaned against the dryer, flipping through Emily's old notebook, filled with her silly drawings and P-math. Do you think this is a good idea? He whispered to no one, going in there with them. He could hear his late wife's voice in his head. Marcus, you think too much. Just be the man who listens. That's the man people trust. By morning, he was still tired, but a little more ready. The strategy room was on the top floor, glass walls, large windows, the kind of room that made ordinary people feel very, very small. Marcus stood out, like a coffee stain on white linen, no lanyard, no blazer, just a clean shirt, Emily's lucky stone in his pocket, and the notebook he hadn't opened since his daughter lost her first tooth. Is this the doorman? The question came from 2 men with perfect teeth and very narrow ties. You can call me Marcus, he replied calmly, or guest contributor if that's easier. Victoria entered just in time. He's here because none of you could solve the nerve delay problem. He solved it. He earned his seat. Let's begin. This silenced the room. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Marcus didn't talk much, but when he did, heads turned. He didn't use jargon, fancy acronyms, or marketing buzzwords. Instead, he drew parallels. Think of your AI model as a single parent, learning to manage 3 jobs, he said at one point. You're pushing it to optimize results without giving it time to understand why you want it to change. One person laughed. Another muttered, damn, that's so true. Jason, a senior engineer, tried not to show his discomfort. I'm just wondering if we're basing our roadmap on bedtime analogies, he said dryly. Have you ever raised a child, Jason? No. Then maybe don't dismiss bedtime. That's where real learning happens. This elicited more laughter than Jason had expected, and more head nodding than Marcus had anticipated. After the meeting, Marcus stepped out into the hallway and exhaled slowly. Victoria followed him, carrying 2 coffees. "I didn't know you were a performance artist," she said, handing him one. "I'm not, but I've been underestimated long enough to be good at playing one. That thing you said about bedtime, that's not just talk. That's my life." They walked side by side, the silence between them now less sharp, more like a space left open on purpose. "Why didn't you go back to engineering?" she asked. "Because MIT doesn't give scholarships to widowed single fathers who work night shifts and pack lunchboxes before dawn. But you could have applied again, gone back, rebuilt everything." "I didn't want to rebuild my life. I wanted to rebuild hers first." He stopped walking. "You sound like someone who doesn't realize how rare that is, or like someone who's too tired to care how rare it is." He looked at her, then really looked at her, and for the first time his voice softened. "Maybe it's time to stop being the guy who makes everyone else's job easier and let someone build something for you." Marcus didn't answer, but the silence wasn't cold, just unfamiliar ground. Later that day, he came home to find Emily waiting at the door with a shoebox in her hands. "How was it?" she asked. Adults in fancy rooms, saying words that didn't mean much until someone brought up bedtime stories. "So you made the dad analogy." "Of course I did." "And no one booed you?" He grinned and opened the shoebox. Inside were a sandwich, 2 stickers, and a folded piece of paper. "I made you a new business card," he said proudly. Marcus Thompson, thing fixer, adult problem solver, full-time dad. "You took out the mop operator. I promoted you." Meanwhile, at Phoenix Technologies, Jason stood with his arms crossed in Victoria's office. "You're promoting her too fast," he said. "No, I'm just recognizing the value I see. He doesn't understand the corporate structure. He doesn't have a degree. Steve Jobs didn't either when he started. Degrees didn't write that code. Insight did." Jason clenched his jaw. "What's really going on here, Victoria? Are you promoting talent, or are you chasing something else?" She didn't blink. "Let me ask you something, Jason. When was the last time you surprised yourself?" She does it every day, and she doesn't even call it ambition. She calls it survival. Jason left without a word. Victoria sat down, opened her laptop, and looked at the simulation results again, not for verification, but because they reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. Clarity. Something Marcus Thompson had brought into the rooms without meaning to. It started with a voicemail. Marcus played it 3 times before deciding it wasn't a joke. "Mr. Thompson, this is Cecilia from the executive office. Ms. Sterling asked me to pass on a personal invitation to you. Tonight at 7 p.m., a private dinner, not business, no tie required." Not business. She looked at the phone as if it could explain. But phones don't do that, especially when the woman in question is Victoria Sterling. He stopped outside the bistro, a small place wedged between a flower shop and a boutique hotel in a quiet part of town. It was the kind of restaurant where the chairs were deliberately mismatched and the waiters knew the owner's dog by name. Victoria was already there, sitting at a table by the window. Her hair was down for the first time, soft waves, no armor, just her. Marcus walked in, his worn boots and winter-weathered coat making him stand out. "You look good," he said, a half-smile playing on his lips. "This is the only shirt I own that isn't ugly. You're looking at it? Then we're both dressed up for something that isn't a date." They sat down, and neither spoke for a while. The clinking of glasses, soft jazz from the speaker in the corner, and the smell of rosemary bread filled the space where small conversations usually took place. Victoria finally broke the silence. "Do you know why I called you here? You like watching inadequate men panic over wine lists." Because I haven't had a real conversation in 3 years, not one that didn't involve a quarterly report or a lawsuit. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You mean no one ever asks you how your day was? They do, but they're really asking how my performance affects theirs. She looked off into the distance, her eyes distant. I eat lunch at my desk. I sign more confidentiality agreements than birthday cards, and some days I forget what my own voice sounds like unless I give myself instructions. Marcus leaned forward. Sounds like you need to fire your calendar and get a therapist. I tried 2 sessions and he quit. Why? He said I made him anxious. Marcus laughed. A full, unfiltered laugh that made 2 diners look over. Victoria looked at him, startled, then quietly, then more freely joined in. There, she said, nodding. What? The human part of the ice. He lowered his head, amused. Do you always talk like this? Only when I'm too tired to claim I belong here. The food arrived, something she couldn't pronounce and didn't bother to explain. It didn't matter. Victoria ate slowly for the first time in years. Marcus listened without interrupting, and the conversation drifted to their childhoods, to the moment when they realized their parents were just human, to favorite books and bad movie endings, to loss. Sometimes, I still hear her voice, Marcus said quietly, when I'm not thinking about it. When Emily falls asleep in the car, or on cold mornings when I smell cinnamon. Your wife? Yes. How long has it been? 6 years. You talk like she's still around. Yes, just not the way I want to. Victoria didn't answer right away. My mother was completely ambitious, she said finally. She told me that if I never got too close to anyone, I could rule the world. She said emotions were a weakness in a suit. And you believed her? For too long. They paused. Then Marcus took something out of his pocket. Emily's latest drawing, now folded at the edges and worn. She drew this the day I spoke at that big meeting, he said. I looked like a hero, like one of those people who fixes broken machines and broken hearts with the same toolbox. Victoria unfolded the paper, a wild-haired stick figure holding hands with a tall woman in heels, both smiling. In the corner, a son, and in the background, a small rug next to a laptop. She stared at it longer than she expected. You know, she said softly, I've signed million-dollar deals, launched products in 5 countries, and stood on stages where CEOs before me were nervous. Nothing has ever affected me as much as this crayon drawing by a little girl who didn't know me, making me feel seen. They left the restaurant after 10 p.m. The night air was cool and crisp, the kind that makes your lungs feel cleaner than they actually are. Victoria walked a step behind him, then stopped beside his truck. You still use this old thing? It works, and it's paid off. You'd be surprised how rare it is. He leaned against the passenger door. You're a strange man, Marcus Thompson. I'll take that as a compliment coming from you. He opened the driver's door, but paused before getting in. Why did you really call me here, Victoria? Because I needed to remember what the truth looks like. You don't perform, you just show up. He nodded. That was enough. See you around, he said, as he climbed into the truck. Marcus, she called back. What? I love your bedtime stories. And with that, she turned and clicked her heels like a period at the end of a sentence and disappeared into the night. The next morning began like any other. Marcus dropped Emily off at school. She hugged him tighter than usual and whispered, You're glowing, Dad. People are starting to see. He smiled all the way to Phoenix Technologies until he walked in and felt it change. A shift in temperature, not in degrees, but in attitude. Fewer smiles, colder stares, and a silence that didn't feel like peace. When he reached for his ID card, the security guard stopped him. I'm sorry, sir. You've been removed from the cleaning staff. Your access is now restricted to management. Orders from the CTO. I guess you got promoted. The words sounded like a threat, not a welcome. Jason Marlowe was waiting in the elevator, tie straight, jaw tighter than usual. "New title," he said, not bothering to smile. "I didn't know you had one." "Special technical advisor to the CEO. Must be nice to skip a step." "I didn't skip anything," Marcus said calmly. "I've been climbing for years, just on a staircase no one bothered to look at." Jason leaned in, his voice low. "Let me give you some advice, doormat. These people smile at you because Victoria told them to, but they're not your friends. You don't belong here." Marcus looked at him straight in the eye. "If I waited to belong, my daughter would still be hungry. I didn't come here to be loved. I came here to build something that works." Later that morning, the team reviewed the optimization Marcus had proposed for the autonomous response model in the strategy room. The calculations were correct, the solution was clean, but the room was frozen. Jason spoke first. "We ran the numbers again. Marcus's logic is correct, but we're not implementing it." Victoria raised her head sharply. "Excuse me? It hasn't been tested at scale. There are no precedents. We're taking a PR risk by using code written by someone who doesn't even have a college degree. You're saying the math is good, but the resume isn't?" Jason didn't blink. "We're a billion-dollar company. Our customers don't want janitor genius headlines. They want pedigree, stability, legacy." The room, slowly, hesitantly shook its head. Marcus sat silently, not defending himself, just watching, like a man who had weathered worse storms and knew which way the wind was blowing. Victoria's eyes locked on him. "Marcus, do you want to respond?" He leaned forward, his voice firm. "I understand. I'm not the person you expected, and maybe that's uncomfortable. But if the numbers are working and the system is improving, then who is really acting unprofessionally, the man solving the problem or the team ignoring the solution? And if I had come here with a Stanford degree and a $1,000 blazer, you would have called that innovation. But because I smell like bleach and have my daughter's sticker on my laptop, you call this commitment." A pause. "Then, if a man's value is measured by how expensive his mistakes are, then maybe it's time to start measuring value differently." The room was silent. Victoria slowly stood up. "We'll implement the update." Jason didn't argue loudly, but his gaze said it all. In the days that followed, Marcus noticed that Marcus nodded less, that conversation stopped when he entered the room, and that the Slack channels he was involved in fell silent. Only Arthur, the CTO, remained the same. One evening, Arthur sat down next to him. "You've alienated them. Your mere existence is a threat. Am I wasting my time here?" "Not if you remember what time is worth, and that you're doing this for your daughter." That night, Emily asked, "What if people don't love me for doing the right thing?" "Then you look for people who do. Simple." Victoria noticed Marcus's absence. She found a letter from Lena in her mailbox. "Thank you for believing in my dad. He smiled when he talked about you. He doesn't smile much now, but I still do. Lena, 6.25. Victoria cried. The next morning, she went to Marcus's apartment. Linnea opened the door. "You're home from work." Victoria went inside and played Lego with Lena. "He left because he thought you embarrassed him," Lena explained. "It wasn't his fault. He reminded me of what's really important." As she left a pink note. "We never had a chance to finish. Mine is VS." Marcus smiled when he saw the note. Days later, Victoria found him in the school hallway. "I want you to give a presentation at the investor summit. I don't wear suits. I don't give speeches. You need the truth, and you have it. When you speak, people listen because you've lived what the rest of us have only modeled in code." "Why me?" "Because I forgot what this company was built on. It's not the polish, it's the people." Marcus took the stage at the Pacific Grand Auditorium. No PowerPoint, no graphics, just Marcus and a microphone. "I used to clean this floor," he began. 2 months ago, I was the guy who came in after hours to wipe the stains off the whiteboards. One of those stains wasn't a mistake, it was a missing piece. He walked slowly. I don't have an MBA, I don't wear a tie, but I know what it means to raise a girl with second chances. A simple diagram appeared. Roots tangled, branches bent toward the sun, a child's drawing of a tree. Machines learn like children. Trial, error, patience. I was just a janitor, but being invisible helped me see what everyone else missed. The room erupted into a standing ovation. Backstage, Victoria said, "I think you saved our year." That wasn't the plan. Then, what was? Tell me the truth. Keep hoping. 6 months later, Marcus was the vice president. He proposed to Victoria, with Emily as the witness, holding a dragon toy. "Yes," said Victoria, 1,000 times yes. Thus, the quiet genius of a janitor, the hope of a little girl, and a CEO's second chance came together to redefine what family truly means.